Gambling addiction is no small fight, even and especially for those who've served. Fortunately, Kindbridge Research Institute is digging deep to understand it. They're finding answers and building better support for military service members and veterans. Curious? Go to Kindbridge Research Institute, KINDBRIDGE Institute.org to learn more about their ongoing programs and initiatives. This is the Fallen Podcast. My name's Dave. I'm a veteran of the United States Army and gratefully in recovery from a gambling addiction since January of 2020. You know, one of the things I really like to talk about when I talk with other people, when I work with other people, is roadblocks, right? I think it's one of the essentials of recovery and gambling addiction. My guest today is an innovator in the space of roadblocks. His name is Matt Zarb-Cousin, and he is the co-founder of Gamban. And if you haven't heard of Gamban yet, believe me, you're going to know what it's all about here in a minute. It's an amazing tool. And Matt, thank you so much for speaking with me today.
Oh, Dave, thanks very much for having me, and thanks for the introduction. Yeah, very excited to share more about what we do. Obviously, it's come from a place of lived experience as well. I've been through a gambling addiction. I'm 13 years into recovery, and yeah, very, very excited to share with you what we do and what our mission is, really.
Fantastic. And by the way, congrats on 13 years in recovery. That's an amazing thing. I do want to talk a little bit about that. So if you could just give us some background. Where do you come from? What's a little bit of your background? Maybe talk a little bit about, your addiction and recovery, and then what brought you to the point of Gamban?
Yeah, sure. So I'm from England, which is where I live. I live in a town called Southend, which is about 30, 40 miles east of London on the coast. I got addicted to machines in betting shops, which we have here, which are shops, obviously, wherever there's high street retail outlets, that you tend to find betting shops, disproportionately in more deprived areas in the country. There are thousands of them. And I went into one when I was 16 and started betting on the machines.
Can you bet that young in the UK? Are you allowed to bet that young, or is it just, did you kind of sneak your way in?
I sort of snuck my way in, yeah.
Okay.
Well, they didn't really do much checking of people's ages or anything like that. So underage, you're supposed to be 18.
Mm-hmm.
And the machines at the time in the shops had stakes up to £100 every 20 seconds. And the main content on there was roulette.
Okay.
And it was very fast-paced roulette, very addictive. Got addicted to them pretty quickly. I had a couple of early big wins, kept going back, obviously, as you tend to, and got into a cycle of loss chasing. That lasted very many years. I was, whenever I wasn't gambling from then on, I was thinking about my next bet. I was thinking about where I could get my hands on money to go and gamble, and all the money I had derived from part-time jobs and other things, student loans, overdrafts, all of that went into the machines. I was extremely addicted to the machines, to the point where I felt I had no reason to live other than to gamble, and led me down to a very, very dark place where it culminated in me losing thousands of pounds, getting into a lot of debt. But it wasn't the money so much as the loss of agency that made me feel like I needed to. The only way I could escape it was to take my own life. So it led me to a point of being very suicidal. And in recovery from then, thankfully, I was able to get help and therapy and other things. And it was very difficult to quit. And it was obviously I relapsed several times even from then. But in recovery, I think because I'd sort of given up on myself quite a lot, I wanted to try and help other people and turn outwards and stop other people going through what I had been through. So I campaigned for a reduction in the maximum stake on the machines I got addicted to, which were the biggest revenue driver in the industry at the time.
Okay.
And our campaign was to reduce the stake from £100 down to £2. And after 6 or 7 years, we succeeded with that. We prevailed. It was a huge uphill struggle against a very well-financed gambling lobby, but we managed to get that change enacted, and I think it was really important. It reduced a lot of harm associated with those machines. But in parallel to that, I co-founded Gamban, which is software that people can install on their devices, which blocks access to gambling websites and apps. This is particularly important for me because I know how addictive casino online casino content can be. I know how addictive roulette and slots can be for people, having been addicted to roulette myself on the machine. So the idea of being able to do this wherever you are at any time on a smartphone is pretty terrifying for me. It would have made my recovery much more difficult. So yeah, really important that I think people have the ability to block access if they want to.
Yeah, totally agree with you. I'm going to go back just for a couple of minutes before we move forward with Gamban. You brought up something that was really interesting that I've experienced for myself, and I know I'm not the only one, is that feeling of hopelessness, that feeling of there really is nobody could understand what I'm going through. Nobody could understand how I can peel away from this. So nobody's going to be able to help me get away from this. Is that kind of how it felt for you?
Yes, I think that there's a lot of shame, and I think there's a lot of feeling of yes, hopelessness, but also I think you internalize a lot of the blame for the addiction. Now, I'm not
Right.
saying that people shouldn't take responsibility for their recovery. We've all had to do that. No one's going to do it for us. We've had to face up to the fact that we're addicted to gambling and we need to quit. The way in which we arrived at that point it was the result of a multitude of factors. It wasn't just about our own individual failings. And I think when I was going through it, I wasn't cognizant or perhaps aware even of how addictive certain gambling products are and how the sector or the operator derives quite a lot of revenue from people like us, people who get addicted to gambling. And the product I got addicted to was it was a particularly addictive product. It had a very high rate of problem or at-risk gambling associated with it. It was about 50% of the people that used it, right? So even though I had to take responsibility for my recovery, it wasn't just my fault that I'd got addicted to it. There was lots of other structural factors. And that's not to take anything away from, people's, as I say, individual responsibility to take control of their recovery and take control of their lives and all that kind of stuff. But I think that the thing that I was missing at the time was that kind of education about what I would call like commercial determinants of harm, the commercial determinants of gambling addiction. And as a result of that, you internalize a lot of the blame. You feel like you're the one that's unable to control themselves when everyone
Yeah.
else can. You feel like, so I think that's what it has a stigmatizing effect. Yes, there was a shame. There was the feeling like you were the only one, feeling like you were alone. No one could really relate to it. No one could understand it. On the face of it, therefore, everyone would
Right.
think you're just making stupid decisions. And so you don't feel like you can talk about it. And so you're very lonely, and it's very isolating. And you feel like gambling is almost an escape from that, an escape from the problems that it caused, the problems that it's causing in your life. And you feel like it's one of those very unique addictions where you can convince yourself almost that carrying on
Yeah.
gambling more is a way to win your way out of trouble and a way to alleviate all of the shame
Yeah.
that the addiction has caused you, right? So it's a very difficult trap to a spiral to kind of get yourself out of.
You served with honor. Gambling addiction doesn't get to rewrite your story. Kleinbridge Behavioral Health is here to help with confidential, judgment free support tailored for veterans and military service members right when you need it. Check out kindbridge.com/appointments and start reclaiming your life. I've said this before and I've heard this said before where gambling is the only addiction where people try to use the addiction to solve the addiction. You
Yeah,
know, if I can just
that's it.
get the one more win, if I can just get myself to a better position, the problem with that is it becomes circular and it just gets you into the same old pattern. I'm really glad that you were able to find help because it's so amazing when we get to the point where you realize, hey, maybe I'm not alone and maybe there is hope for me. And talk to me a little bit about what kind of efforts it took to get the reduction in the max betting. Like what kind of work did that take to get you? That could not have been easy.
Yeah, huge amount of work and tenacity. And it wasn't just me, it was a lot of people involved in that campaign. And the coalition that we built was substantial, and a lot of things had to happen for that to come about, really. And
Sure.
person in charge of gambling in government who had been supportive years previously, who was in the right place at the time where there was a review, and the review led to what we wanted. By the end of the campaign, we had basically every single national newspaper taking editorial positions in support of it.
Oh, wow.
We were up against a huge obstacles in terms of the gambling lobby, how well financed they were, how well connected they were, all the different levers they could pull. There was a lot of, I would call it, intellectual corruption around how gambling was perceived, and
Okay.
I go back to that the notion of the internalized stigma, and the responsible gambling narrative of basically detracting from the commercial determinants of harm, detracting
Right.
from how operators might be the policies of the operators and the practices, and just focusing on the individual and saying we need to teach people to gamble responsibly. And I feel like that was the prevailing ideology of government. It was how they
Mhm.
perceived gambling. It was basically everyone can gamble responsibly except these people
Right.
who are problem gamblers. It wasn't really looking at what we can do to change products and practices and regulation to reduce harm, taking a kind of public health approach. It wasn't even in that mindset. So a lot of the charities that were commissioning research, that were deriving de facto government funding, were in line with government thinking on that. So very much focused on quote unquote problem gamblers rather than industry practices. I'd say we had to really kind of change the parameters of the conversation about gambling. That took very, very many years. And yeah, I mean, it's extremely difficult to bring about any change in gambling policy. But what we've managed to do since, I think, has been to reset the conversation. So we're talking
Mhm.
much more about regulating the industry as a mechanism for reducing harm rather than targeting people who have got gambling problems and trying to educate them in some way to gamble that
Right.
way that isn't doesn't signal that they're addicted to it. We're now much more talking about stake limits on products. So since the change was made on fixed odds betting terminals, we've now got stake limits on online slots along similar lines, which I think is really
Right.
important. We've now got a statutory levy, which is 1% of industry gross revenues, which is going towards independent research, education, and treatment, which I think is really important, rather than this kind of, I'd say, industry friendly ideology, which is to basically say everyone can gamble responsibly except the problem gamblers. We need to tell the
Right.
problem gamblers how to gamble responsibly, as if like it's a choice that we're not
Right.
gambling responsibly. The conversation's definitely shifted as a result of that campaign, and that's obviously really welcome.
It's interesting the parallels between what you just described and what we're experiencing here in the US. And at least there's hope that that conversation is moving in a similar direction. So I, for one, really appreciate the efforts you put in because you've laid the groundwork not just for there at home in the UK, but really worldwide, where people have something to grab into and say, hey, look what these guys are doing. So much appreciated. So let's talk a lot about Gamban. Let's talk about what sparked it, how it originally came about, and how it's grown since.
Yeah, as I mentioned before, what sparked it was my co-founder Jack Simmons reached out while I was campaigning against the fixed odds betting terminals and explained that there wasn't blocking software on Mac computers, and like what could we do about it. And he had a sort of method of being able to block gambling websites on his laptop, and he wanted to show me, and that's kind of where it started. Showed that it was difficult to remove and how useful this would be for people in recovery. We got some investment, and we developed the prototype further. We developed versions for all platforms, which we launched in around 2016,
Mhm.
2017. Yeah, I mean, the idea, so obviously we started in 2015. That was when we first had the first kind of prototype. So we're coming up now to 10 years, 10
Man.
years in October. Since we've started, we've had over 400,000 people download Gamban. We've got around 100,000 active users. There are over 280,000 gambling websites and apps on our block list. And the way it works is people sign up for a Gamban account and they will download the protection onto all their devices. And then it's designed to be as difficult to remove as possible. We're working on a much more effective solution for iPhones, which will be out next month, which will be impossible to remove for the duration of the protection. It covers not just the regulated market, but also the black market. So wherever you are in the
Oh, wow.
world, if you've got Gamban installed, then you won't be able to access a gambling website or an app. So it's very, very effective in that regard. Yeah, we have a number of different arrangements where we try to work with regulators to make it free. So if someone wants Gamban, they don't have to pay for the license. The regulator will pay, or the treatment provider will pay.
Okay.
And we have those type of arrangements in the UK, in Ohio, in the Netherlands, in Norway, and Finland. So it's becoming much more part of the process of self-exclusion. So if you want to self-exclude, that obviously stops you accessing the regulated market. But then it's like, what the unregulated market? Well, here's blocking software that you can put on your devices, and you can install it onto all your devices. You can't access the illegal market either. And I think that's really, really important. And we advocate for a layered approach to exclusion anyway. So if people want to quit gambling, they should be able to self-exclude. They should be
Right.
able to download blocking software. They should be able to switch on transaction blocks with their banks, which in the UK is very ubiquitous across the sector. You know, all the
Okay.
banks offer transaction blocks that you can't switch off without a cooling off period. I think advancing this idea that if people want to quit online gambling, which is a frictionless activity, there needs to be as much friction as possible in the way between them wanting to gamble and the action of gambling if they want to quit.
Yeah, and you hit on a very, very important point. Is creating friction is really what we're trying to do here. Gamban, self-exclusion, any of these methods are not a cure. It is a stopgap. It is a way to create a buffer between the desire to gamble and the access to it, so that you can then create that space to think about it and go, okay, maybe I need to do more here to take care of myself. When you install Gamban, and you can do this, you're saying, on all your devices, your tablet, your phone, your laptop, your desktop, you can block the legal market, you can block the offshore market, if you will. What about things like commodities, crypto, those sorts of things? Are they inclusive into this?
They are. So there's a very fine line, I think, between investing and speculating, and
Hmm.
there are some platforms, I think, that veer towards speculating and casino-fied leverage trading, which we do block. We have to make a judgment call on these,
Hmm.
and we're adding about 300 domains a day to the block list.
Okay.
So that's the scale of it. Where we have platforms that are clearly not conducive to someone's recovery from a gambling addiction, we'll obviously add those to the block list. And that does include
Okay.
leverage trading, frictionless trading, anything that really isn't in the interests of the consumer, that doesn't advocate or recommend an optimal investment strategy for that person. If it's just trying to get people to constantly change their position and constantly check the app and making basically commissions off the trades, and it's
Right.
trying to get you to engage as much as possible, particularly the leverage trading, which I think is very, very toxic. It's basically betting on the price of a commodity to go up or down, and crypto as well because of its volatility. And
Right.
we are in the process of segmenting the block list, and in our roadmap, we want to be able to give people the opportunity to opt in and out of certain things to be blocked or otherwise. But at the moment, if you download Gamban, all of those things will be blocked.
Do you know right now, do you know offhand how many countries you have active that you're actively operating in, that people are actively taking part in with Gamban?
Yeah, most countries at the moment, where we're deriving most of our users through the website, are Brazil and the Philippines. We translated Gamban into Brazilian Portuguese fairly recently, and
Wow.
that's a huge impact on user numbers. The Philippines as well. There's been a
Hmm.
huge. We're not doing any marketing at all in the Philippines. I mean, I placed a story with a journalist, a local journalist based in Manila, about the numbers that we were getting, and that actually
Hmm.
was that went online over the weekend. But we're not actively doing any marketing there. People are finding us. They find that they're searching for Gamban. I don't know if it's been recommended in communities there, but clearly there's a lot of demand in Brazil and in the Philippines and in other countries, but the awareness is not quite there yet because
Okay.
we're not doing anything to advance that awareness. But I'm pleased people are getting the help they need. and if we're helping people quit gambling, that's what we exist to do. But it definitely doesn't bode well, I don't think, when you're getting a lot of people. We're getting about 6,000 registrations from Brazil every month,
Wow.
and
Wow.
we're not doing any marketing. So
Yeah.
that doesn't, that's not, for me, that's not a great litmus test for the situation in Brazil. I would say
Completely
that.
agree.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's always bittersweet for me, Dave, because as a person who's gone through it, every person that downloads Gamban is probably a person that has been through what I've been through, and I'm glad they found us, and I'm glad we're helping if we are, but it's also like I wish that they hadn't been through that. So, can we
Yeah.
do anything to advance the conversation about regulation? Can we enhance consumer protections? I mean, that's really what the company's mission is. That's what we'd like to do. We'd like a world where we don't the demand for Gamban isn't as great as it is, perhaps.
Yeah, and that's a great, honestly, what a great goal to have. At least you have a product in place that can help people who are in that position. But ultimately, the goal would be, and listen, my goal for this podcast is the same thing. I'd love to get to the point where people don't need to listen to this podcast anymore, but it's here to raise awareness in the interim. So, based on what you just said about that international access, and obviously, I have a military audience here in the U.S., and actually outside, I have people who listen in different countries that are military service members. If I am deployed, stationed overseas, I'm an American soldier, and I was stationed in Korea as an example. Does Gamban come with me? Does it move with me, or do I have to register within each country? Or do I just put Gamban on, and anywhere I go, it's going to work?
Correct. You put it Gamban on, and wherever you go, it will work. Wherever you are in the world, our block list is the most comprehensive gambling block list I think that exists. So we've got a lot of mechanisms by which we can detect sites, even that in wherever they are. So that you only need to download it once. So for any military personnel that want to quit online gambling or don't want the temptation of gambling online, then yes, Gamban will work for them.
That's fantastic. That is so great to know that you can just carry it wherever you go. So I have a question that popped up for me as I was preparing for this, which is, and I both know that there are other blocking softwares out there. There are other people that are doing at different levels what you're doing. Does that help the overall cause? Does it create challenges within that space? I mean, what's kind of your take on that?
Yeah, I think our objective really is to make blocking software as good as it can be, and I
Okay.
think there are ways in which this can be done that are okay, satisfactory, but not
Mhm.
as well as we do it. And I
Okay.
take a huge amount of pride in our product and in investing in our product and making sure it's effective as possible. I don't think if this is going to be done properly, I don't think it can be done on the cheap. Is what I would
Yeah.
say. I think if people find other blocking software products that aren't as effective, I'd like to think that they will give us a try eventually. So, I think the idea of advancing blocking software as a concept, I think
Right.
in that respect, the fact that there's others in the space that are doing that, I welcome that, and they've got there's other entities springing up all the time.
Sure.
I just know how difficult this is to do well, and how much needs to go into it. We still feel like we're only getting started.
Yeah, and it's kind of a tough question, and I apologize. I didn't mean to back you into a corner there because you can only focus on what you do because you know how your product works. You know how your blocking software works, and it's without knowing all the nuances, it's kind of hard to say. But I was just interested in hearing from somebody in recovery about that, and I agree with you. The more effective that software can be, the better. Obviously, I want if I'm going to get in there and try and block access to gambling, I want it to be the best I can put on my phone, on my computer, whatever it is. So just curious, and thank you for answering that. I do appreciate it.
Yeah, no
Um,
worries. No, and again, it's even things like where the how I mean, this is a bit boring and technical, but like how many DNS servers you have and where they're located. So if you do go on
okay,
holiday, how much it's going to slow down your computer if you don't have that server capacity. Whether there's a customer support function, if you've got a problem, are you going to get a response from customer support quickly? We've just invested quite heavily in that because it's really important. If people can't get the protection working on their device, then that leaves them vulnerable to relapse, and we want to make sure that they've got that protection properly installed and everything like that. So it's just, I think, a lot of things that we want to do to enhance what we do
Mhm.
in its totality, not just the product, but also the service. And in order to do that, I think, it does require a lot of investment, and so
Yeah.
ensuring that we have that viability going forward has been a real challenge. But we're now in that position where we can start looking 3-5 years ahead, which I think is very positive.
And that that all but answers my next question, which is where do you see Gamban headed? Is there anything that you didn't mention? Is there anything, and you don't, I mean, obviously be as broad as you need to. Is there anything within your vision, a direction you see Gamban going where it's not yet?
So I mentioned briefly about segmenting the block list and
Mhm.
customizable blocking, which I think would be a great addition. That's obviously in our roadmap. We've also got the new version for iPhones coming very, very soon. I'd say probably weeks away now, which is
Okay.
exciting. I would like to do more with state regulators in the US. See if we can emulate what we've done with Ohio. We are in conversations with other states, which is positive. But I think it's really important that people have the opportunity at the point of self-exclusion to get Gamban for free if they
Right.
want to layer that up to block the black market. User numbers for people that subscribe through the website are growing 5% a month. So
Okay.
that's, it's significant numbers. Of the 100,000 or so people that we have as active users, about half of them are subscribers through the website. So
Okay.
um,
Okay. And how does somebody learn more about Gamban, subscribe to it? Is it just gamban.com or
It is, yes, Gamban.com. If you're in Ohio, you can get it for free through Timeout.
okay. If you're going to get it in Ohio, who would you reach out to in the state of Ohio to get access to Gamban?
TimeoutOhio.com. And
Timeoutohio.com? Okay.
yes, and the link is on there, but I think it's signposted on the site if you access it from the US. So you can see it on a banner as you go on
Okay.
Gamban.com. You'll be able to see it there.
And my understanding is too, and I know this actually firsthand, that there are some clinicians, some treatment providers here in the U.S. that are offering, like the treatment provider that I do work with provides a 1 year subscription that they cover. So there are also treatment providers out there, kind of, I guess, grabbing bulk access to it and then giving it out to their people they're working with as well. So I would say if it's
Yeah,
somebody's out there and they're getting ready to work with a treatment provider, ask them as well if they have access to it.
yes,
You
correct.
know.
We work with a lot of the state chapters as well. Yeah, the NCPG chapters. So there may well be free licenses available through them.
Anything else you want to kind of conclude with? Any other final thoughts for you?
No, I think that's great. Thank you very much for having me. And if anyone wants to reach out, my email is matt@gamban.com. Very happy to hear from anyone who's interested in what we do and what we're trying to achieve. And yeah, thanks again.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time. And what I want to say is if you're somebody out there who's struggling, who's not sure what to do, who's not sure where to go, here in the US, if you're in crisis, you can dial 988. If you're a veteran, you can dial 1 after 988. If you're a military service member, veteran, even if you're not, if you just want more information and you can't find anybody else, just email me, fallinpodcast@gmail.com. If you want a link to Gamban, if you want to learn more about Gamban, or you didn't write down Matt's email address, ask me, I'll give it to you. Well, I'll give you whatever access you need to get the help you need, because that's what we're here for. Matt Zarb-Cousin from Gamban, thank you so much for your time. And that's all we got. Take care.
Thank you.